This is Tom Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search for my site. Vanity Fair, September 2013. Goldman's Programmer, Part 5. The trial of Serge Aleynikov lasted 10 days, was notable for its paucity of informed outsiders. High-frequency trading is a small world, and the people who do it or know anything about it apparently have far less interest in testifying at trials than in making their personal fortunes. The one outside expert witness on the subject called by government, a professor at Illinois Institute of Technology named Benjamin Van Leet, had never actually done any high-frequency trading himself and had little to add on the value, on the gist of what Serge had taken. About the market itself, he was badly misinformed. He described Goldman Sachs as the New York Yankees of high-frequency trading. He turned out to have testified as an expert witness in an earlier trial involving the theft of high-frequency trading code, after which the judge had described him as what he said, utter baloney. The jury consisted mainly of high school graduates, lacked anyone with expertise in programming computers. They would bring my computer into the courtroom, recalls Serge incredulously. They would pull out the hard drive and show it to the jury as evidence, save for Misha Malishev, Serge's brief employer. The people who took the stand had no credible knowledge of high-frequency trading, how the money is made, and what sort of computer code is valuable, etc. Malishev, who'd been subpoenaed as a witness for the prosecution, testified that Goldman's code was of no use whatsoever in the system he'd hired Serge to build. He insisted that it had never been his plan to import code from anywhere because he wanted to build Tesa's system from scratch. He wanted something flexible and fast that he could continuously upgrade. Even if offered Goldman's entire high-frequency trading platform, he would not have been interested. But when he looked over, he saw that half the jury appeared to be sleeping. If I were a juror and I wasn't a programmer, said Serge, it would be very difficult for me to understand why I did what I did. Goldman Sachs' role in the trial was to make genuine misunderstanding even more difficult. Its lawyers coached witnesses, its employees on the witness stand behaved more like salesmen for the prosecution than citizens of the state. It's not that they lied, said Serge, but they told things that was not in their expertise. When his former boss, Adam Schlesinger, was asked about the code, he just said everything at Goldman is proprietary. I wouldn't say he lied, but he was misunderstood. Our system of justice was a poor tool for digging out the truth. What was really needed, it seemed to me, was for Serge Aleynikov to be forced to explain what he had done and why to people able to understand the explanation and judge it. Goldman Sachs had never asked him to explain himself, and the FBI had not sought help from someone who actually knew anything about computers or high-frequency trading business. And so for 2 nights in a private room at a Wall Street restaurant, I convened a kind of second trial to serve as both jury and prosecution. I invited half a dozen people intimately familiar with Goldman Sachs high-frequency trading and computer program. All of these people were authorities on our abstruse new stock market. Several had high-frequency trading code, and one had actually developed software for Goldman's high-frequency traders. All were men. Among them, they'd grown up in 4 different countries, but all now lived in the United States and worked on Wall Street. Like most Wall Street people, they were naturally cynical of both Goldman Sachs and Serge Aleynikov. They followed his case in the newspapers and noted that the shiver it had sent down their spines of Wall Street software developers. Until Serge was sent to jail for doing it, Wall Street programmers routinely took their code they had worked on when they left their new jobs. A guy got put in jail for taking something no one understood. As one of them put it, every tech programmer out there got the message. Take code and you could go to jail. It was huge. Still, they assumed that if Serge had been sentenced to 8 years in jail, he must have done something wrong. They just hadn't bothered to figure out what it was. Now they would. The restaurant was one of those old-school Wall Street places that charges you $1,000 for a private room and then more or less challenges you to eat your way back even. Food and drink arrived in massive quantities, vast platters of lobster and crab, steaks, size of the desktop computer screens, steaming mountains of potatoes and spinach. It was the sort of meal cooked decades ago for traders who spent their days trusting their gut and their nights rewarding it. But in this monstrous feast was now being served to a collection of weedy technologists and people who controlled the machines that now controlled the markets, and who had, in the bargain, put the old school out of business. They sat around the table, staring at piles of foods like a conquering army of eunuchs who had stumbled into the enemy's harem. At any rate, they made hardly a dent. Serge, for his part, ate so little and with so little interest that I half expected him to lift off his chair and float up to the ceiling. His new jurors began, increasingly by asking him lots of personal questions. They wanted to figure out what kind of guy he was. They took an interest, for example, in his job market history, and noted that his behavior was pretty consistent with that of a geek who had more interest in his work than how much money he made from it. They established fairly quickly, how I do not know, that he was not just smart, but seriously gifted. These guys are usually smart in one small area, one of them said later, explained to me. For a technologist to be so totally dominant in so many areas is just really, really unusual. They began the probe to his career at Goldman Sachs. They were surprised to learn that he had super user status inside Goldman, which is to say he was one of the handful of people, roughly 45 in a firm of 32,000 employees, who could log in as an administrator to the system. Such privileged access would have enabled him at any time to buy a cheap USB flash drive, plug it into his terminal, and take all of Goldman's computer code without anyone have any idea he had done so. The fact alone didn't prove anything to them. At one point, it out that Serge directly, lots of thieves are sloppy and careless, and just because he was sloppy and careless didn't mean he was not a thief. On the other hand, they all agreed there wasn't anything a bit suspicious, much less nefarious, about the manner in which he had taken what he had taken. Usually a subversion repository to store code and deleting your bash history were common practices, especially if you type your password into command lines. In short, Serge had not behaved like a man trying to cover his tracks. One of those assembled state the obvious. deleting bash history was so clever and devious, why had Goldman ever found out he had taken anything? The story of the FBI found so unconvincing that Serge had taken the files because he thought they might later parse into open source code within and made complete sense to his new jurors. As Goldman had permitted him to release his debugged or improved code back to the public, possibly in violation of the original free license, which often stated that improvements must be publicly shared, the only way to get his hands on these was to take the Goldman code that he had taken in the bargain, some code that wasn't source, which happened to contain in the same files as open source code, surprised no one. Grabbing a bunch of files that contained both open source and non-open source code was an efficient, quick, and dirty way to collect the open source code, even if the open source code was the only part that interested him. It would have made far less sense for him to hunt around the internet for the open source code he wanted, as it was scattered all over cyberspace. It was entirely plausible to them that Serge's interest was confined to the open source code because that was the general purpose code that might be repurposed later. The Goldman proprietary code was written specifically for Goldman's platform. It had been of little use in the new system he wished to build. 2 small pieces of code Serge had sent to Teza's computers before the arrest both came with open source licenses. Even if he had taken Goldman's whole platform, it would have been faster and better for him to write the new platform himself, said one juror. Several times he surprised them with his answers. They were all shocked, for instance, when the day he arrived at Goldman, he had been able to send Goldman source code to himself weekly without anyone at Goldman saying a word about it. At Citadel, if you install a USB drive in your workstation, someone is standing next to you within 5 minutes asking you what the hell you're doing, said one. Most were surprised how little he had taken in relationship to the whole. 8 megabytes in a platform that consisted of an estimated of 1 gigabyte of code. The most cynical among them were surprised mostly by what he had taken, rather than what he had not taken. Did you get the strats? Asked one, meaning Goldman's trading strategy. No, said Serge. That was one thing the prosecutors hadn't accused him of. But that was the secret sauce. If there is one, said the juror, if you're going to take something, you take the strats. I wasn't interested in the strats, said Serge. But that's like stealing the jewelry box without the jewels, said another juror. You had super user status, said the first. You could have easily taken the strats. Why didn't you? To me, technology really isn't interesting, said Serge. You were interested in how they made hundreds of $millions, asked someone else. Not really, said Serge. It's all one big gamble, one way or another. Because they had seen it before in other programmer types, they were not totally shocked by his indifference to Goldman's trading, or by how far Goldman had kept him from the action. Talking to a programmer type about the trading business was a little bit like talking to a house plumber work in the basement about the card game of the mafia was running upstairs. He knew so little about the business context, one of the jurors said upon leaving the informal trial. We have to try to know as little as he did, another added. He knew as much as they wanted him to know about how they made money, which was virtually nothing. He wasn't there very long. He came in with no context and he spent all of his time troubleshooting. At least some part of the reason had remained obvious to the nature of trading business. They all noticed was that his heart was elsewhere. I think passion plays a big role, says a juror who himself had spent his entire career writing code. The moment he started talking about code, his eyes lit up, added another. The fact that he kept trying to work for open source code, even while he was at Goldman, says something about the guy. They didn't all agree that Serge had taken what he had taken had no value, either to him or to Goldman. But what value it had created a new system would have been trivial and indirect. I can guarantee you this. He did not steal code to use it in some other system, one said, and one of the others disagreed. For my part, I didn't fully understand why some parts of Goldman's system might be useful in some other system. Goldman's code is basically like buying a really old house, one of the jurors explained, and you take the trouble to soup it up, but it still has problems, a really old house. Teza, the new high-frequency trading firm for which Serge left Goldman, was going to build a new house on new land. Why would he take 100-year-old copper pipes, and put them in my new house? It isn't what they couldn't be used. It's that the amount of trouble involved in making it useful is ridiculous, added the third. It's way easier to start from scratch. The conviction grew even stronger as they learned later, as Serge failed to mention at all the dinners, that the new system Serge planned to create was likely to be written in different computer code language than Goldman's code. The perplexing question, at least to me, why Serge had taken anything at all. A full month after he left Goldman, he still had barely touched the code, and he had taken, if the code was so unimportant to him, that didn't he bother to open it up and study it? If most of it wasn't so clunky or particular to Goldman's system, then it was next to useless outside of Goldman. Why take it at all? Oddly, the market insiders didn't find this hard to understand, one of them later put away. If person A steals a bike from person B, then person A is riding a bike to school. If person B is walking, A is better off, and the expense of B. That is clear-cut in most people's view of theft. In Serge's case, think of being a company for 3 years. You carry a spiral notebook and write everything down. Everything about your meetings, your ideas, sales, clients, meetings. It's all written down in that notebook. You leave for your new job and you take the notebook with you, as most people do. The contents of your notebook related to the history of the prior company, but having very little relevance in your new job. You may never look at it again. Maybe there are some ideas or templates of thoughts you can draw on, but the notebook is related to your prior job. And you will still start a new notebook at your new job, which will make the odd one irrelevant. For programmers, their code is their spiral notebook. It enables them to remember what they worked on, but it was very little relevance to what they will build next. He took a spiral notebook that had very little relevance outside of Goldman Sachs. The real mystery to insiders wasn't why Serge had done what he had done. It was why Goldman Sachs has done what it had done. Why on earth call the FBI? Why coach your employees to say what they need to say on a witness stand to maximize the possibility of sending him to prison? Why exploit the ignorance of both the general public and the legal system about complex financial matters to punish this one little guy? Why must the spider eat the fly? They had no end to theories about this, but one was more intriguing than the others. It had to do with the nature at Goldman Sachs these days and the way people who work for the firm get ahead As one put it, every manager on Wall Street tech group likes to have people believe that guys are geniuses. Their whole persona among their peers is that they and their team can't be replicated. But people find out 95% of their code is open source. It kills the perception. So when the security people come to them and tell them about the downloads, they can't say, no big deal. And they can't say, I don't know what he took. It put in this way, the process that ended with Serge Aleynikov sitting inside a federal prison may have started with some Goldman Sachs employee concerned about their bonus. As they walked down Wall Street into the night, one of the jurors said, I'm actually nauseous. It makes me sick. The mystery of the jury of his peers had more trouble involved solving Serge himself. He seems, and perhaps even is, completely at peace with the world. Had you lined up the people at those Wall Street dinners and asked the American public to vote for a man who had just lost his marriage, his home, his job, his life savings, and his reputation, Serge would have come in dead last. At one point, one of the people at the table stopped the conversation about computer code and asked, "Why aren't you angry?" Serge just smiled back. "No, really," said another. "How did you stay so calm? I'd be fucking going crazy." Serge smiled again. "But what does craziness give you?" he said. "Why does negative demeanor give a person? It doesn't give you anything. You know that something happened. Your life happened to go in the particular route. If you know you're innocent, you know it. But at the same time, you know you are in trouble, and that's how it's going to be." To which he added, to some extent, "I'm glad this happened to me. I think it strengthened my understanding of what living is all about." In the comfort of Wall Street cornucopia, that notion that the hellish experience he had been through had actually been good for him was too weird to pursue, and they returned to discussing computer code and high-frequency trading. But Serge actually believed all of this. Before his arrest, before he lost all he thought important, he went through his days and nights in a certain state of mind, in a self-absorbed, prone to anxiety, worry about his status in the world. "When I was arrested, I couldn't sleep," he says. "When I saw articles in the newspaper, I would tremble with fear of losing my reputation. Now I just smile. I no longer panic an idea that something would go wrong." By the time he was first sent to prison, his wife had left him, and he had no money and no one to turn to. He needed other people. He didn't have very close friends, says Marcia Leder. He never did. He's not a people person. He didn't even have anyone to be power of attorney. Out of a sense of Russian solidarity and pity, she took the job, which meant, among other things, frequent trips to see Serge in prison. "Every time I would come to visit him in jail, I would leave energized by him." She says, "He radiates so much energy and positive emotion that it was like therapy for me to visit him. His eyes opened to how the world really is, and he started talking to people for the first time. He would say, 'People in jail have the best stories.' He could have considered himself a tragedy, and he didn't. The prison in which Serge spent his first months also housed violent criminals. It essentially nonverbal, but he didn't find hard to stay out of trouble, and even found people to talk to and enjoy talking to. When they moved him to the low-security prison at Fort Dix, he was still in a room crammed with hundreds of other roommates, but now he had space to work. He had remained in some physical distress, mainly because he refused to eat. His body, he had really bad times there, says Leder. He lived on beans and rice. He was always hungry. I'd buy him these yogurts, and he would gulp them down one after another. His mind still worked fine, though a lifetime of programming in cube farms left him with the ability to focus in prison conditions. A few months into Serge's jail term, Mesha received a thick envelope from him. It contained roughly 100 pages covered on both sides. It was Serge's meticulously 8-point script. It was computer code, a solution of some high-frequency trading problem. Serge was afraid if the guards found it, they would deem it suspicious and confiscate it. A year earlier, he had been sent away. The appeal of Serge Aleynikov had finally heard. By the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, the judge was swift, unlike anything his lawyer, Kevin Marino, had seen in his career. The very day Marino, who by then was working gratis for a client who was dead broke, made him argument the judge's ordered. Serge released on grounds that the law he stood accused of breaking did not actually apply to his case. At noon, February 17th, 2012, Serge was set free. A few months later, Marino noticed that the government had failed to return Serge's passport. That's odd, he thought. He called and asked for it. The passport never arrived. Instead, Serge, now staying with friends in New Jersey, was arrested and taken to jail. He had no idea what he was being arrested for, and neither did his lawyer. When I got the call, said Marino, I thought it might have been something to do with Serge's child support. It didn't. A few days later, the Manhattan DA, Cyrus Vance, set out a press release to announce that the state of New York was charging Serge Aleynikov for accessing and duplicating a complex proprietary and highly confidential computer source code owned by Goldman Sachs. The press release went on to say that the code was so highly confidential that it is known to the industry as the firm's secret sauce, and thanked Goldman Sachs for its cooperation. The only employee of Goldman Sachs to go to jail in the aftermath of the financial crisis was the employee Goldman Sachs wanted to send to jail for taking something from Goldman Sachs. Apparently they now wanted him back in. Marino recognized the phrase secret sauce. It had come from the industry, but from his opening statements in Serge's first trial, when he mocked the prosecutors for treating Goldman's codes as if there was some kind of secret sauce. Otherwise, Serge's rearrest made no sense to him. To avoid double jeopardy, the Manhattan's DA office found new crimes of which to charge Serge for the same action, but the sentencing guidelines for the new crimes meant that if convicted, he wouldn't have to return to jail. He'd already served time for crimes the court ultimately deemed he did not commit. Marino called the DA's office. They told me that they didn't need to punish him anymore, but they needed him to be held accountable, said Marino. They want him to plead guilty and let him go on time served. I told him in the politest terms possible that they can go fuck themselves. They ruined his life. Oddly enough, they didn't. Inside of me, I was completely witnessing, said Serge, about the night of his rearrest. There was no fear, no panic, no negativity. His children had reattached themselves to him, and he had a new world of people on whom he felt close. He thought his life was better lived this way. He even sent a memoir to explain what had happened to anyone who might be interested, as he wrote. If the incarceration experience doesn't break your spirit, it changes you in a way that you lose for many years. You begin to realize that your life is not ruled by your ego and ambition, and it can end any day at any time. So why worry? You learn that just like on the street, there is life in prison, and random people get there based on the jeopardy of the system. The prisons are filled with people who cross the law, as well as by those who were incidentally and circumstantially picked and crushed by somebody else's agenda. On the other hand, as a vivid benefit, you become very much independent of material property and learn to appreciate the very simple pleasures in life, such as sunlight and morning breeze. This is the end of part 5 and the end of the article, Vanity Fair, September 2013. The writer for Vanity Fair is Michael Lewis. One man's Goldman Sachs nightmare. It is not only the quality of the story, but the quality of the work of Michael Lewis that inspired me to invest this time and create an audio file. Credit to Vanity Fair for the article and Michael Lewis, the writer. This has been Tom Doody, middle-aged American, living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, or restful night's sleep. Ciao.